Ryan Ruff. We've got Homer Smith lined up. He's going to be joining me in just a moment. Homer joining us from the offices at Convergent Wealth Partners. Homer being a private wealth advisor himself. Here on the show, we dive into a variety of different wealth management related topics. And today we've got a great topic lined up for you guys. It's a topic that we have hit in a prior episode on really a more granular basis in terms of what it is and how the inner workings of it really function. But today we're going to be taking kind of a new lens at this topic. We're going to be refreshing, reframing, and really exposing some real value that this strategy has for business owners as well as a business itself. What am I talking about? I'm talking about an employee stock ownership plan, or an ESOP for short. So today we're going to be talking about what those benefits are. Also, of course, what an ESOP really is at its core, but how this can be leveraged specifically from a tax planning perspective for business owners. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome Homer aboard to get the conversation rolling. Homer, good to see you today. How you doing?
Hey, Ryan, good to be here. And yeah, thanks for reframing that up a bit. I know recently we did an episode talking about some of the tax strategies around a business sale. And while we touched on a number of topics, we didn't dive into the ESOP as much, and actually just recently had a conversation with a client that led to a discussion around how an ESOP could be a fit. I was like, this would be a good topic again to dive back into and kind of in this light of tax planning around a sale of a business, how this could fit. So looking forward to the conversation around that today.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start high level, for anybody that didn't have a chance to tune into that episode, why don't you just frame it up for us? What is an ESOP? How does it kind of function? And why are we even talking about it in the first place today?
So an ESOP, I think it works really well in general for a company that has, really strong employee culture and an owner that is, wanting to transition the company and keep that culture in place. And also an owner who may not feel like the most, highest value sale price is the most important factor, just the way that ESOPs are valued. You're not necessarily going to get some synergistic value out of it. So that the ultimate, sale price isn't the most important factor, but really the employee culture and passing on a legacy within the company is more important. So, in general, what an ESOP is effectively a retirement plan, a qualified retirement plan that trust that is buying the shares of the company from the owner, and then allocating those shares out to the existing employees, based on salary, time in the business, their role. There's a few factors that impact how much each of them might get, but basically all eligible employees would have some level of allocation of the shares. And the thinking behind an ESOP often is, if somebody actually has a direct ownership, share, are they going to be a little more motivated with the day-to-day work because they're now an owner and they've got more direct incentive to drive value in the company? And there's been some studies by Rutgers that show that there's a slight improvement to the overall performance of the company from an ESOP for having that. But also, from the owner selling, there's some significant tax advantages that we can get into today as well. But in general, it's a way to pass the company, transition the company from an owner to the employees, with a lot of structure and support around it to make sure there's really strong management of the company left going forward as well.
Sure. And Homer, we're coming off the heels of a conversation on this show where we talked a lot about some of the tax considerations that a business owner should have when they're approaching the sale of their business, amid a ton of other considerations. But so let's shift the focus, so for folks that want that more granular conversation about how an ESOP really functions for their business, I recommend traveling back in time. Check out a prior episode where Homer and I dove into ESOP specifically. But today, Homer, why don't we now pivot down the road from the tax planning perspective? Why is an ESOP valuable? Let's start with the lens from the business, and then we can talk about the owner. But why would an ESOP be beneficial from a tax planning perspective for a business as a whole?
Yeah. So first I'll start with saying there's a lot of potential advantages to structuring your business as an ESOP sale. There's one major disadvantage in that this is effectively a leveraged buyout of the owner. So whether it's through bank financing and or owner financing, you're piling a significant amount of debt on the balance sheet of the company in order to complete an ESOP transaction. But with that comes some very large advantages. So first, as part of the process, just like with like a profit sharing plan or a defined benefit plan for a business, the business is making contributions into the retirement plan on behalf of the employees, and that works the exact same way with an ESOP. So each year, the business will be allocating dollars into the ESOP plan that would then be allocated amongst the employees. And that ESOP contribution is tax deductible, just like it would be for any other qualified retirement plan. But I mentioned the debt, and that's a critical factor to all of this. And that typically, when a business takes on debt, they do get some deductibility on the interest payments for that debt, which helps with the cash flow of that. But the principal payments are not tax deductible, and typically in general. However, with an ESOP, that is this, I believe it may be the only debt structure out there where both the principal and interest payments are tax deductible. So while it is a pretty significant burden on the business to pay down that debt, at least all payments to pay off that debt are tax deductible. So that's a huge advantage. And one last advantage for the company is once all the debt is paid off, and if the company is structured as an S corp going forward, once all that debt is paid off, because the company now is effectively owned by a qualified retirement plan, the company no longer pays income taxes on its earned income. And so a huge benefit to that, if that company is going to be an ongoing concern, stay in business, imagine a competitive advantage where you're not having to deal with federal and or state income taxes as part of your balance or your ongoing cash flow and income statement. It could be a 30 to 50% cash flow advantage depending on what state you're in as you go out and compete to grow and hire or retain employees. So pretty significant advantages to the company from a tax perspective.
Oh my goodness, absolutely, Homer. So thanks for shedding some light there on those. But let's pivot now to the owner specifically. We heard the benefits from the business, but why would a owner, be considering this for themselves? What can an ESOP really do for them as they're looking to maybe either sell or move further into the business as a whole?
Yeah, so we mentioned, I mentioned at the opening, typically when you do an ESOP transaction, you're not going to necessarily get the highest value that you might in an open market transaction just because of the requirements in terms of the valuation methodology used. And so there might be a slight disadvantage for that, but where you can make up for it as an owner is in some of the significant tax benefits. So when you sell your company to an ESOP, if structured as a C corporation, when you sell it, and we can get into some of the mechanics of how you go from C to S in the future. But if you sell as a C corp and you sell at least 30% of your shares to the ESOP, you're able to defer out the gain on the sale indefinitely as long as you then structure the investments that you would invest into in the right way. This is called a 1042 transaction. So many people are familiar in real estate with a 1031 exchange, where they're able to exchange the value into another piece of real estate and defer out the gain. This is very similar. So with a 1042 exchange, you're able to defer the sale on your corporate stock as long as you invest in approved, other typically U.S. based corporate stock or debt. And we would obviously get into the nuances if that conversation ever came up, but it allows you to potentially indefinitely defer out the gain. And if you didn't need access to that capital, if you then were to ultimately pass away at some point in the future, you can get a step up for your family on that. So it's a pretty significant tax benefit that comes with some requirements again on how you manage the money and how you access the capital. But again, on a pretty significant transaction, being able to defer out that immediate tax is a pretty significant benefit.
I'd say so. And Homer, I mean, there's benefits on both sides of the aisle, obviously with considerations that go alongside them. But I think one thing that would be super helpful for our audience is if they could hear, an example, a story, perhaps. I know you have conversations surrounding ESOPs with a lot of your business owner clients. Anything come to mind that could maybe even just kind of bring all this value that we're sharing to put a story behind it or to put some faces behind it even?
Yeah, well, I'll start as we dive into that. Could definitely give some examples by just saying it definitely isn't for everybody. So, I mean, the tax benefits sound pretty amazing, right? The business after the transaction is complete and debt is paid off is a tax-free business. The owner can receive the proceeds and potentially not pay tax on the proceeds for their lifetime. It seems like a pretty well. Why wouldn't everybody just do this? In reality, as we've run this analysis for multiple clients, at the end of the day, there's a very certain type of business that you need to be running, or types of businesses generally, high cash flow, consistent cash flow because of the debt burden this puts on the business. You need to know that you're going to have consistent cash flow coming in to pay that. So businesses that have very large up and down cyclical periods, this may not be a structure that could could make sense for them. So I'll just start by saying it's not for everybody. And so as we get into the conversation, we pretty quickly start to whittle down, the number of options for clients. And this is typically one of the first ones we kick out, depending on, again, the cycles in their business and how it might fit. But as we get into it, as clients that have actually moved forward, so we've worked with clients that have completed ESOP transactions. They have definitely discussed with us post transaction that they've talked to employees that are now a part of the ESOP structure, that have an allocation of shares through the ESOP trust, and they've definitely commented on the fact that it does change their mindset and how they approach the day to day of the business, knowing that they have a more direct ownership of it, and they want to see the value of those shares rise over time. And we're working with owner on having completed that 1042 transaction, and while again it's a process and there's a lot of moving pieces that you have to deal with when setting up that structure, the ability to have avoided all of the tax on that sale and allowing a larger dollar amount to continue to grow and work for them over time allowed them to achieve a number of other goals as we had additional growth from that capital. And while we did ultimately do some sales and realize some of those gains, we were able to slice and dice how we did that and kind of pick and choose when we pay the taxes. So we've seen some direct benefits from the clients we work with that have done this transaction. So again, there's a lot of moving pieces. It's a pretty complex structure, but in the end of the day, if you do decide to move forward with this transaction, because you're selling it effectively back to the business itself, you're not typically needing to involve as many intermediaries that you would if you're doing an external sale. So you may be able to reduce the cost of sale by a few percent just because you're not having to pay an investment bank or business broker. But again, it's not right for everybody. But if we do, part of the process, and I'm sure one of your next questions would be, well, if someone wanted to know more, how would that look? It really is important to dig into the employee culture you have and how important it is passing on the legacy of the company and kind of keeping your structure in place versus a much larger company coming in and kind of changing around everything. And again, looking at the tax planning and the cash flow planning of, can the structure actually work? Would you put the business financials of the company at risk by piling on a significant amount of debt that they would have to then service, for the first 5 to 7 years before they got to the other side and all the other tax benefits of this? Can you make sure they can do that without hindering the ability to run the company? So it's a lot of factors, but if all of those things align, this solution can be pretty significant from a tax planning standpoint.
Well, very much so, I mean, it's not a one size fits all solution. It's very custom tailored to a business owner, their unique situation outside of the business, and then of course the business itself and inside. So a lot of considerations go through. And that being said, Homer, so let's say I'll take my typical question, I'll extend it, leave it a little further even, and that is, not only if somebody would be interested in reaching out to your team to kind of pick their brains about an ESOP, A, what would be the best way they can get in touch with you, but B, what does that conversation look like? There's a lot of intricacies to a given business, not only the business, but also the owner's life. So what does that conversation look like, and how do you guys really launch that process?
Yeah, so good question. So first, we're going to look at all of the different options that are available to them when it comes to a transition out of the business. And what we'll find is often they might even come to us or be referred to us because somebody in a mastermind group, a Vistage group or some other group they're a part of might have mentioned that they've completed an ESOP and here's all the benefits of it and here's how awesome it is. And they'll come to us and say, hey, we heard how great ESOPs are. What is this thing? How does it work? And does it work for us? And so we'll start from a bigger conversation of, okay, if you're thinking about exiting, let's look at all the different ways you can exit, from a synergistic, buyer, to a private equity group, to ESOP, to, management buyout, all of the different options that are available to you. Let's review the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages of all of them and kind of come to determine, is this something that we should even keep on the table? And once we determine that, hey, yeah, this is an option that makes a lot of sense in general, let's start getting into the weeds. What's the cash flow of the company look like now? And what would we anticipate it to look like going forward? Are you as an owner willing to accept some level of risk on the other side of this? Because even if a bank comes in and provides a significant amount of the financing, they're typically going to require that the owner keep a pretty significant amount of the value of the transaction in a seller note. And they don't get paid fully on that until the bank gets paid off first. And so you're keeping some level of risk in the transaction. Are you willing to do that? And so there's a lot of factors that we need to consider to ultimately whether this works out. And while I think there's well over 6,000 ESOPs out there in the market today, I would say it's still a very small number of transactions that happen on an annual basis end up coming in the form of an ESOP, because even though it does have all these benefits, as we get really into the weeds and really factor in each of them, again, it has to be the right fit, right time, right kind of company, right kind of cash flow for it to ultimately work. But for those that it does work for, it can be a really powerful vehicle.
And Homer, for anybody that is in fact interested in having that conversation with you to see if this might be the right fit, what is the best way they could get in touch with you guys?
The best way to reach out to me and set up an initial consultation, and we'll happily again walk you through, ESOPs in general, get into more of the weeds of it on the conversation with you. We'll ask obviously a lot of information on your business and determine, hey, is this something that really is a fit, and are there other sales structures that you should be considering in addition to an ESOP, and then help think through what the next steps would be for you to really get to the bottom of if it is a fit. But yeah, would love to have that conversation with you. So yeah, happy for you to reach out, email me directly, and we can start a conversation and go from there.
Fantastic. Well, Homer, I appreciate you carving some time out of your busy schedule to jump into ESOPs again with me, and looking forward to being back on the next one with you.
All right, sounds good, Ryan. Thanks for having us, and yeah, we'll look forward to talking with all of you soon.
Of course, of course. And hey, folks, we're going to take one final moment, as we always do on the show, and thank you all for stopping by and spending some time with us. If you did enjoy today's conversation, you learned a thing or two, you took something away from today's discussion around ESOPs, well, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you checked us out on today so that you don't miss out on great content just like this, where Homer and I unpack these different wealth management discussions that could benefit you, your business, or really just make you question the way you're doing something currently. Before Homer, I'm Ryan. We want to go ahead and say so long now, but we appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Advance Your Wealth.